Monique. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Hi, Katie.
And nice to see you, but I guess
Nice
it's
to see you.
not bonjour, but it must be bonsoir for you
It's
at this
bonsoir.
point.
Yeah,
Anyway, so nice to see you. Thank you for doing this
thank you for
because I think a
having
lot of people don't necessarily understand this case. And in the US, I think it's gotten some attention. It was the focus of the Daily today, the New York Times podcast. But it is a sensational case, a disturbing case to say the least. And for people who have not maybe followed it as intensely as I know you have, Monique, can you tell us who Gisele Pelicot is and what this case is about?
So Gisele Pelicot is this ordinary, she's about to turn 72, or she maybe just turned 72. She was retired. She was living in the countryside in Provence. And her husband, Dominique, got arrested or got detained for filming up a woman's skirt in a supermarket. And when police looked at his phone and looked at his devices, they found something like 20,000 images of a woman who was unconscious and being raped by scores and scores and scores of men. And it turned out it was Gisele, his wife, that Dominique had been for about a decade drugging her and inviting men in to rape her, men that he met on a chat room on the internet, and raping her himself. And
And
he'd been
over
videotaping
what
all of it
you
and
said,
taking photos.
yeah, I was going to say he videotaped it, which is irrefutable evidence of the crime, which must have been some perversion of his on top of many other perversions, clearly. But this was, as you mentioned, Monique, over a 10-year period. From what
Yeah.
year to what year did these crimes take place?
From about 2011 to 2020.
And so I think Gisele Pelicot has become, I don't want to say a feminist hero, but a real hero in France and among many people who truly admire her courage and bravery. She decided to waive her anonymity and to face the 50 men accused of raping her in court. And I think people have been so taken by the way she has conducted herself and carried herself with such strength and dignity. Tell me about sort of the reaction to this woman, Gisele Pelicot, in France.
And the reaction, and it's not just France, it's global, or, it's from all, she gets letters from all over the world. It's been absolutely extraordinary what this has meant for people. And every day there are women standing outside the courthouse. There's a line of people in the courthouse that greet her, mostly women, some men. Women cry when, women come up to her in the street. She's been incredibly inspirational for people. And I think part of it is that, we had Me Too, but it was Hollywood and, music industry and all these sort of, chic industries or aspirational people, and she's just this ordinary grandmother. And so I think she resonates with ordinary people on a completely different level. And it's so relatable, I mean, it's so horrific and not relatable, but at the same time, she was happily married for 50 years. It was her husband, and these men are just ordinary men, the men that they are in the courtroom with us. You wouldn't think twice if you saw them on the street.
Tell us
And I
about,
think it's just really
tell us,
shaken people.
yeah, tell us, Monique, about some of the background of the men because they range from, right? I think one is in like his late 20s and one is in his early 70s, and they're all ages and all backgrounds and
Yeah.
professions, right?
Yeah. So the youngest is this guy named Charlie Arbeau, and I believe he's 26 now. And, and then there are men in their 70s and all in between. And there's a nurse, there's a fireman, there's some truck drivers, there is an elected official, there was a prison guard. I mean, it really runs the gamut. The one thing, the site that he was using was geolocalized. So they're all pretty much local to this area. But no, and some of them are detained. So there are 50 men, and about a third of them are detained in these. They attend in these glass boxes, but the rest of them are in the courtroom with us. I chat with them. We all do. They're sort of, mixing with us. It's incredibly bizarre. But
Do they feel
if you were
a
sitting next to
sense?
one,
Do they feel a sense of shame? Are they embarrassed or humiliated? I mean,
there are 50 of them, right? So obviously it runs the gamut. Some of them are. Some of them say, they have all kinds of defenses. Some of them feel like that they were manipulated by him, by the husband, that they were set up. Other people say, I thought this was just a libertine, couple, that this was their thing, and I went there and thought this was what they wanted, and now, I didn't mean to rape. This is something we hear a lot. I didn't intend to rape anybody. I didn't. I went there, but my intention was not to rape anybody. I'm not a rapist, and we hear that a lot.
And well, let's talk about that, the semantics of intent versus consent, because that has been, I understand, a big part of the trial. Can you explain the discussion that's surrounding those two words?
Yeah. So in French law, there's a concept that intent is required for something to be a crime. So some of the defense lawyers are arguing if there was no intent to commit a rape, then it's not a rape. Whereas the prosecution and Gisele's lawyer, she's the civil party, they call it. And so the prosecution questions the men, but so do her lawyers. And they say over and over, they ask over and over, did at any point Gisele give you her consent? And they say no. So the prosecution really is, they're focusing on this notion of consent, which is not explicitly written in the law, right? So experts argue that it's inherent in the law, of course, but the defense lawyers are really saying these men didn't intend to commit rape, so it wasn't a rape.
I just
And,
don't
the verdict
understand
is
that,
zero.
Monique. I don't understand that. I mean, they raped this woman. She was unconscious. She was drugged by her husband, who, by the way, I I don't understand what his story is. I mean, he sounds like a creep of the highest magnitude, but I just don't understand how that argument could hold any water. They raped her. It's on videotape.
Something.
And by the way, she suffered a lot of medical effects of this repeated rape. I mean, this happened. I mean, do we even know? We talk about 50 men, but it wasn't on one occasion. It was over a 10-year period. So is there any estimation of how many times she was actually raped?
I mean, they're probably at least hundreds. And there are 50 men on trial, 51 men. One is, on the run, but 51 men. There are between 70 and 80 men that were seen in the videos, and they couldn't identify them. And let's remember, these are the ones that they have on video.
Right.
There's no telling if there were others that just weren't videotaped or that they didn't find the videos of. I mean, it's hard to imagine that this is actually the whole picture that we're getting here.
And it
And
seems to me that, oh, go ahead.
I'll just say that when you watch the videos, because they screen some of the videos in court, there, you can hear it and think, oh, maybe they misunderstood. There is absolutely no mistaking it. She is so profoundly unconscious. She's slack. Her head is lolling. She's snoring. I mean, there's absolutely no room for ambiguity here.
I wanted to say that French case law, perhaps wrongly, says that without intent to commit rape, there is no rape, period. Do you think the law is going to change in the wake of this trial?
It's a big debate here. So, there have been multiple attempts by lawmakers to change the law over the years and recently. Unfortunately, the French government right now is incredibly unstable. It keeps falling. So that's hindering efforts. But there's also a real debate here, and a lot of feminists are against changing the law. A lot of feminists argue that if you add consent to the law, that then will put the burden of proof, the onus on the victim to prove that she or he, but obviously in most cases it's a woman, did not consent. And so a lot of people are worried that it actually will make things worse for victims.
Well, it sounds like they couldn't get much worse because these are the statistics. Roughly 86% of sexual violence complaints and 94% of rape complaints are dismissed immediately in France, with only 0.6% of reported rapes resulting in a conviction. I mean, I have to say, Monique, I was shocked to read these numbers. I had no idea that sexual assault was treated so cavalierly and dismissed out of hand so frequently in France. What the hell is that about?
I mean, it's not just rape that's the problem here too. I did a piece a few years ago about men killing their partners and wives. France has a huge problem, and what's interesting is, you think of France as the land of love. It's an incredibly patriarchal, they talk about
Misogynistic.
being a Latin misogynistic society, and what is fair to say is even if they change the law, that's not really the bulk of the problem. The bulk of the problem is the police. When you go, you get to report, you get dismissed. I mean, I've seen this, domestic violence things get dismissed. It trickles all the way down. It's societal attitudes, it's police training. There just needs to be, it's judges. I mean, these judges have been great, but they're not the norm perhaps, or they're certainly, there are bad judges out there. They need the country to really fix the problem that it has. And it has a very serious problem. I mean, we see that there are all kinds of sexual assault and sexual abuse cases coming up all over the place now in France. And to fix it, they really do need to make a big investment, train police, give them resources. There needs to be a kind of societal push to change these
I mean,
attitudes.
it's pretty shocking that, as I said, those statistics that I read, I couldn't believe it. And I know you've been talking to the defense and the prosecution, and what are both sides telling you? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like a pretty open and shut case. There's videotape evidence. I mean, what else do they need? And is this a judge will make the decision, or is this a jury
No,
trial?
no, it's not a jury trial. It's a panel of 5 judges. And they're
A-
deliberating right now. We expect the verdict tomorrow morning.
And so tell me what the mood is there and what people are thinking the verdict will be.
It's interesting, because the men are there again, so you sort of get a feeling from them. On Monday, they were given the chance to have their last word, and I have to say the mood was pretty somber afterwards. I think that as recently as last week, many of them thought that perhaps they would be acquitted. Of course, I can't read their minds, but I think that fewer of them think they're going to be acquitted now. I think they're just worried about how long their sentences are going to
Well, I
be.
wanted to ask you, are 50 and 51, but one is on the run. But of these men, will the sentences vary from case to case, from
Mhm.
how often they were seen on the videotape? Or, I mean, if they all committed rape, they all committed rape. I mean, why would the sentences vary?
I mean, some of them went back multiple times. Some of them they couldn't prove penetration. There was one who is only accused of touching her. There's an attempted rape charge, right? They all did different things. Some went back as many as 6 times. So they've asked for stricter sentences for them. They asked for 20 years. The maximum sentence is 20 years. So they've asked for 20 years for her husband, and then they range from 4 years up until 18 years.
I can't believe he's not getting, he wouldn't be sentenced to more than 20 years given the depravity of his actions. And I wanted to ask you about the judges. You said it was a 5 judge panel. Are they all men? Are there some
No,
women judges?
no. Yeah, there are 3 men. So there's an alternate, right? So there are 3 men and 3 women. One of the women is an alternate.
And so obviously that's good news that at least there's some women. If you can only imagine what it would be like to have the 5 judges all male. And do you think that they understand this isn't just, as you mentioned earlier, a story that people in France are talking about? This is a global story that's gotten enormous coverage. Do you think that might influence the judges, even though it sounds like attitudes in France about sexual assault are incredibly backwards and antiquated?
So the president of the panel has done all of the questioning, and he has been really, really strong on bringing up the consent thing over and over and over. So you definitely get the sense that he really understands that consent is at the core of this. I also think that
You mean in in
everybody,
in Giselle's
in
favor?
Giselle's favor, he asks every man, did she consent at any point? Did she? I mean, he keeps going back to this issue of consent. I also think that there's not a person in that courtroom who doesn't understand that this is a historic trial that people here will be talking about and reading about in 50 years. So I think everybody's mindful of the real weight that's on them here.
So when do you expect the verdict to be delivered?
tomorrow morning at 9:30.
And what do you think will become of Gisele Pelicot? I imagine, you know, she is, as we mentioned at the beginning of this, seen as a real heroine in France and worldwide. Um, I imagine that people are approaching her to write a book and all kinds of things, right?
Yeah,
That
she's been
thankfully,
bombarded.
I mean, in a good way, it's wonderful that at least she has an opportunity to, you know, be celebrated and even make a living after enduring all of this horrific stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, she,
Have you gotten to know
streaming.
her?
I mean, I wouldn't say I've gotten to know her. I spoke to her. The press has been very respectful. They haven't really approached her. We all have lunch in the same restaurant, and so she knows us by regard, and she smiles at us. But everybody's been very respectful to give her space. Monday, after the last statements, some of us spoke to her. Her lawyer introduced her to me. Um, so she's now, but I wouldn't say I've gotten to know her, but we've watched her for a long time. She's incredible. As you said, she's going to be incredibly solicited. I know that streaming services have asked her to do things, and there are books being talked about, and she can do pretty much whatever she wants now. And frankly, she deserves the remuneration that would come with that. Um, a lot of people have said to me, this has been this has taken over her life, and it's given what happened to her sort of meaning. And people have asked, do you people worry that perhaps when it dies down, well, there'll be a void that she then has to deal with. Uh, it's a fair question. She also had 4 years between the discovery of the videos and the beginning of the trial, and she's done a lot of work. She said that she spent hundreds and hundreds of hours walking by herself, having kind of imaginary conversations with her husband. She's been very supported by by psychological professionals, and I think she'll be okay. She's actually remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, she really is. And she said she wanted to lift the shame felt by rape victims. She said, quote, I wanted all women victims of rape, not just when they have been drugged. Rape exists at all levels. I want those women to say, Mrs. Pellico did it and we can do it too. When you're raped, there is shame, and it's not for us to have shame, it's for them. So she does seem like a remarkable woman. Meanwhile, someone is asking, where did her husband get the drugs that he used? Did that not raise red flags?
He was getting them from a pharmacist. He was getting a prescription from a psychologist. They were anti-anxiety drugs. They were the kinds of drugs that a lot of people take and could get. And we've all asked that question. Like, he went back so many times, and one journalist found the pharmacist, and he just said, these are drugs that people take. So it's fair. You may think that it should have raised red flags. It's a fair question. Apparently it didn't.
Yeah, and one other person just before we go said, "Does she feel loved and supported? I'm hoping she hasn't been ostracized." Has there been some backlash against her as a result of her being willing to bring this case?
I mean, I haven't seen any, social media is social media. I doubt she's on it very dramatically. What is the sort of louder voice is that of these women who are there every single day in the courtroom. Every time she walks out, there are people applauding her. They give her flowers. People write her letters from all over the world, sometimes just addressed to Gisele Pelicot, and they get to her. She's like Santa Claus now. And I think that's been incredibly gratifying for her.
Wow. Well, it's incredible, harrowing, highly disturbing case. And I really hope, for her sake and for the sake of so many women in France, that justice will be served. And, as she said, that these men will feel shame instead of the victim feeling shame. So, Monique, thank you. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it's El-Faizy.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, thank you so much. I know you've written an article for Wake Up Call for us, which we really appreciate. And
It was a
I guess you're on.
piece. It was a piece that ran in the Persistent first, which is a feminist website.
Yeah. So how can people follow your work and the work of the Persistent? Are obviously you're on Instagram, so you're
I'm on
covering
Instagram.
this.
I have a Substack, so I've been writing about it on my Substack, and I'll continue to write things about it going forward, and the fallout, and there will almost definitely be some appeals, and so I'll continue to follow it.
And maybe I can reach out once a verdict is reached.
Yeah, I would love that.
And I can check in with you then. Anyway, thank you for explaining this important case, and it's really nice to meet you, Monique.
You too, Katie. Thank you.
Okay, bye, everyone.